Imagine walking into a crowded room and suddenly feeling a wave of despair crash over you, heavy and suffocating, even though nothing has happened to you personally. A stranger in the corner breaks down in tears, and within seconds, the sadness leaps from them to the next person, and then the next, until the entire room is drowning in grief. What if emotions, the invisible forces that shape every choice and every moment of our lives, were no longer private, no longer contained, but contagious like viruses? What if joy, anger, fear, or love could spread from person to person like wildfire, unstoppable and inescapable? What kind of world would that be? Close your eyes and imagine it. You're walking home from work, tired but calm. Then you pass a man shouting in rage at his phone, his voice cutting through the air like broken glass. In an instant, that rage isn't just his anymore. It slips into you, igniting your pulse, tightening your chest, making your fists clench. You don't know why you're angry, only that the fire burns inside you now and you can't stop it. What would you do at that moment? Would you fight it or surrender to it? This is the terrifying and fascinating question. What if human emotions became contagious diseases? The very essence of who we are, the fragile balance of our inner lives, would no longer belong to us alone. Imagine how quickly society would unravel, how fragile order would become. If fear could sweep through a city like a plague, if joy could rise in a stadium like a fever, if despair could spread faster than any virus humanity has ever known. Picture the early days of this phenomenon, when doctors and scientists first began to notice the strange outbreaks. Entire classrooms of children breaking into uncontrollable laughter, not because of a joke, but because one child's giggle infected the rest. Entire offices collapsed into silence when a single worker broke down crying. Families at dinner tables suddenly falling into fits of rage that none of them could explain. At first, it would be dismissed as coincidence, a trick of social influence, something psychologists had always suspected about the way humans mirror one another. But soon, the evidence would be undeniable. These were not just imitations, these were transmissions. Now imagine the fear. Fear itself is perhaps the most dangerous contagion of all. In a world where emotions spread like disease, fear would become a weapon more powerful than any bullet or bomb. One terrified scream in a crowded subway could infect hundreds within seconds, sending the entire train into chaos, people trampling one another in blind panic. Cities could fall not to earthquakes or wars, but to ripples of terror that no wall or border could contain. But then, think of the other side. What if joy could spread just as quickly? What if a single burst of laughter at a wedding could infect everyone in attendance until the air itself vibrated with happiness? What if love could move like a fever, binding strangers together in instant unity? Would the world collapse into chaos, or would it evolve into something extraordinary, something almost divine? Here's the paradox. Human emotions are messy, unstable, unpredictable. They are the very thing that makes us human. Yet if they became contagious diseases, they would no longer be personal experiences. They would become forces of nature, as unstoppable as storms, as dangerous as fire. How would governments respond? Would they declare quarantines for outbreaks of rage? Would hospitals create isolation wards for grief? Would scientists race to develop vaccines against sadness? Pills to block the transmission of envy? Masks to shield us from panic? Picture how relationships would change. Trust, already fragile, would become almost impossible. Could you sit with your friend while they cried, knowing their grief could infect you like a sickness? Could you kiss someone you loved, knowing their anger might leap into your bloodstream? Parents would fear their children's tantrums. Lovers would hesitate before holding hands. Strangers on the street would avoid eye contact like it was radioactive. Loneliness might become the only safe emotion left, because isolation would be the only way to protect yourself. But is a world without connection still human at all? Now imagine the darker possibility. What if someone decided to weaponize emotions? A leader could stand before a crowd and unleash their own fury, infecting thousands with rage, sending them marching with blind violence. A terrorist could walk into a city square and unleash pure despair, crippling an entire population without ever firing a gun. Entire nations could collapse not from physical destruction, but from emotional plagues. Emotions turned into weapons of mass destruction. And yet hope lingers. If joy, compassion, and love could spread just as powerfully, then maybe, just maybe, humanity could discover a new kind of unity. Imagine a movement built not on ideology, but on shared waves of kindness. Empathy sweeping through communities like healing floods. One person's courage in the face of danger could spread to 1,000 others, turning fear into strength. One person's forgiveness could infect a divided nation, rewriting the story of humanity in ways we have never dared to dream. But ask yourself this: would such a world truly be free? If your emotions are no longer your own, if they can be stolen, replaced, or infected at any moment, what does individuality even mean? Are you still you, or just a vessel for whatever wave of feeling happens to pass through you that day? Would freedom even matter in a world where identity is constantly rewritten by forces outside your control? The world would never be stable again. Entire cities could swing from despair to joy in a single day. Economies could collapse when outbreaks of greed ripple through financial districts. Wars could ignite when waves of hatred sweep across borders. And yet, miracles could happen too. Diseases of cruelty could be replaced with epidemics of compassion. Outbreaks of violence could be countered by sudden floods of peace. At the heart of it lies a haunting truth. Emotions are already contagious, just not in the way we imagine here. A single smile can brighten a room. A single scream can start a stampede. A single act of love can ripple outward in ways we can never fully measure. What this thought experiment shows us is that our inner lives are not as private as we believe. They are fragile threads in a vast, invisible web, connecting us in ways both beautiful and terrifying. So, what if human emotions truly became contagious diseases? Would we collapse under the weight of uncontrollable waves? Or would we finally learn what it means to be one? Would we discover a world where love itself is the most powerful epidemic of all? Maybe the real question isn't whether emotions could become contagious, but whether they already are. And if that's true, then every choice you make, every feeling you share, every smile or every frown is already spreading further than you realize. The question is, what will you choose to spread?